It's time to get your checking account to zero with free checking from PenFed. That's zero ATM fees, zero balance requirements, and zero time spent waiting for your paycheck to direct deposit because you can receive it up to 2 days early. Open your account with just $25 and see how big zero can be. Apply online today at PenFed.org/free checking. Early direct deposit eligibility may vary between pay periods and timing of payer's funding. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
PenFed's got great rates for everyone.
We'll get rolling here. So, limited knowledge here. Abby and I watched a couple videos and did some reading. And so, whitetail and mule deer, different habitats. Whitetail, more river bottoms, areas like that. You're looking for trees in that river area. So that's kind of what we were looking at in scouting. As far as just basic habitat, if you are online scouting, what type of stuff are you looking for?
Man, this is also really important to start off by saying, like, what are you looking for? Abby, do you want to shoot like any whitetail buck, or do you want to try to find maybe a little bit more mature buck? Like, what do you want out of the hunt?
Well, I put in for this tag because I've never shot a whitetail before, and driving through agricultural areas in Wyoming last year, I just saw a ton of whitetails out on the, alfalfa fields and everything. So it seemed like it would maybe be doable with my bow. So that's I'm hoping to get probably any buck with my bow.
Ooh, okay, cool. So do you want to do it on the ground, like spot and stock style, or are you trying to do it like out of a tree stand or a blind? Do you know yet what kind of you're looking for there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a tree stand or a blind. I was thinking about probably the strategy would be to set up on kind of travel routes or near travel routes and try to get one that way. But yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing really, so.
No, that's awesome. And I will say, so like, if you want some good inspiration and stuff, the hunting public guys do some awesome, like on the ground hunting, like tactics and stuff that you should definitely check out. Okay. Because I think there's kind of 2 ways you'd want to approach it. Well, probably 3 ways you'd want to approach it. And you could either still hunt, which is kind of like creeping slowly through the areas you think that they might be in or that you've seen them in. You could spot and stalk in this area, which is probably how I would personally do it. Because there's a lot of like vantage points that overlook these areas where these deer are going to be. And if they're out feeding, you can kind of sneak in and try to make a good play that way. And then there's the third one, the ambush style, which I think that one is especially effective if you know and can get there and scout or put up trail cameras. It's probably the most effective, honestly, because you're not making the last move, right? I mean, you know where they're coming to and from, and but that also takes a little bit more preparation, either beforehand or with trail cameras and stuff like that. So that's kind of I don't know, keep those things in mind, because each of these spots is going to have a little bit different characteristics that lend themselves to a specific style or another. So I would imagine you're trying to come out here in early September, or are you trying to bring your bow out in November during the gun season?
No, yeah, probably sometime in September for sure. Yeah,
Sweet.
Some of those areas, it almost makes me nervous, like having people out there with rifles, because there's so much stuff going on. So. Oh,
totally. Yeah, I don't blame you at all. There's some areas in Wyoming where they have archery only exclosures, and I haven't triple checked, but and in particular that happens in the kind of walk-in and hunter management areas. For those who don't know, those walk-in areas and hunter management areas provide access to private land usually. So sometimes if you're too close to houses and stuff, you got to run your bow in rifle season. But I don't think there's any of that where guys were looking. Yeah. There's some out there by you guys in Laramie though, but that's a different song and dance. So.
From what you know, this is something that we were talking about as we were looking at these spots. Like, what's the difference between like archery pressure and then rifle pressure? And that could be, there might not be a lot out there about archery hunting for whitetail, but that doesn't mean it necessarily doesn't happen. So based on what you kind of know and kind of hear, is there a big difference between archery and rifle? Are not as many people going after whitetail archery wise?
I would be dang surprised if you had like quote unquote a lot of pressure. Now, I say that you're probably gonna have people like in one of these places you end up going, or something like that. But I'd be really surprised if you guys have a whole bunch of like issues trying to get away from folks. So you should feel good about that.
Okay.
And I do think, especially when you think about just the makeup of Wyoming hunting seasons and hunting system, like even if there are folks out there in September with their bow, they're not going to be hitting it nearly as hard as when they would be with their rifle. Mm-hmm. So I'd take those things into consideration.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we'll walk through the 4 spots that we have chosen for you. I think Abby will probably talk about why she'd kind of picked these spots and what we were looking for, and then what we found versus what you may have found. So Abby, you want to talk about the first spot?
Yeah, and just does he have the order of the spots we're going to talk about, or?
Yeah, we're gonna go from right to left or counterclockwise. You good with that, Jaden?
Yeah, I'm good with that, and I've got a bonus spot for you too.
Oh boy.
At the end of it all, and it flows perfectly with what your direction is here, so that'll work.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, so that first spot is kind of out on BLM land. It looks like good mule deer habitat that kind of butts up next to some agricultural areas. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess with that, we drove through it, and I don't think it looked pretty bad for whitetail, I think was what we decided. But I don't know, I guess
now, I was just going to say, like, feel free to describe it a little bit more in detail, not necessarily with names, but like,
mm-hmm.
what's the layout of what you guys were looking at in particular?
Well, so there's sort of a bigger river that there's agriculture kind of all around the river, and then a smaller creek that feeds in there. So having not a lot of familiarity with whitetail in the west, I didn't know like how far up some of those creeks whitetail might go, or just out into some of those sagebrushy areas, like if whitetail go there at all, was sort of a question I had. Probably can be answered easily by the internet, but
Well, I don't know, man. And it's really interesting. So right now, like Wyoming, like a lot of places, is going through whitetail expansion, right? Like the whitetail are doing really well as a generality. And what we're finding is that whitetail is showing up in more sagey areas, kind of like on these little tiny creek beds. Now, where you sent me a pin, it was kind of like on a creek that was pretty tight in a draw. And knowing what I know about, so this is kind of important, right? Like the drought this year in that area is pretty bad. Not a lot of water out there. I would be surprised if that has much more than a trickle in it by the time season comes around. And it could change if we get some late rains or whatever. But, I really like some of this stuff that's irrigated, that is on land that you can hunt. Just above it is that public land that they irrigate. Do you see that? It's just to the north of your pin.
Yeah.
Now, all of that stuff, it I think has more of the characteristics you're looking for. And what'll happen is probably those deer will bed in that creek bottom, because it's going to be cool. And there's like thick, probably Russian olives and sagebrush down there. And they're going to pop up out of the ravine and then hop up onto the ag land to go eat. So, one thing I think about though is if you wanted to do some spot and stock type hunting, this would be a great area, up by these ag lands to do that, because there's not a whole bunch of treed cover that is going to take up a bunch of space. So if you see a whitetail disappear into the creek bed right there, he's probably just right there, near, and you could sneak up to the creek bottom and you'll be within range. So I think that, if you wanted to do that, like I said, that spot and stock stuff up there by that ag land, or the irrigated land that you can hunt on, is probably would be the best spot and stock spot of the ones that you guys sent me pins of.
One of the things that we didn't like about that spot was we kind of anticipated a creek that was kind of meandering through with maybe a couple trees here and there, but it looked like it was almost like boggy. It was those cattails or something like that. It didn't really look like there was anything fresh at all there, and it just looked looked pretty bad going down that way. So we didn't think that anything would maybe come up from the larger body of water up that creek, but that irrigation stuff up north does look better.
Yeah, and the cool thing about whitetails, and I don't know if it's the cool part, it's actually the frustrating part as well. They'll stuff into freaking anything. If it's damp and cool during the day, and they can hide in there, like they're gonna stuff into it, whether it's a sagebrush or just a deep cut like or cattails, like they'll stuff into it. And I think that the proximity to that good feed is probably going to be the proximity to that good feed is going to be the defining factor of if they're in that stuff or not. So I would really look at that spot, especially because you have good vantage points around there, and it's not like it's going to be hard to see those fields from really even from the road. So
cool. Any other comments about part 1 there, Abby?
No, that's good. I didn't even think about doing the spot and stock thing there, so that's some good idea. Yeah,
and one of the things is Abby, you're probably way more patient than Jeff or I combined, but if you just get tired of sitting, that'd be a good place to go check out anyway.
Yeah, cool. All right, so moving on to that second spot. That spot is basically on the river, pretty a lot of agriculture, a lot of irrigation.
So this spot here, for those, it's right next to the main highway, which sometimes in for whitetail, I think the general notion is that they're not too concerned about the roadways, right? Like it's just not as big of an issue usually. Mm-hmm. But I do notice that there's not as much topography, and there's maybe not as much thick cover next to these ag fields. So that's something to keep in mind, is like if somebody else drives by on this highway and sees a deer out there, they'll see him, unless it's corn right now. I don't know. Did you drive by that spot?
Yeah, we actually drove by that spot, and we went down one of those roads, and there's some texture, and it looks like a little creek bed, but there was no water in there at all, but it was definitely shaded. There's one that's closer to the road and one a little bit further down toward the end of the property. And so that's what kind of made us think it might be okay, but there wasn't even water in there at this point. So, there just can't be any water later.
Right, totally. And I do think it's funny. I look at this and I go, man, this could be a good mule deer spot. Kind of similar to that other situation, except the other one had I think a little bit more water. The first spot had a little bit more water than this one. And I say that because I view this highway as kind of a barrier to the main water source, which is down there. Now, I don't have your regs in front of me. Can you hunt across the road in that other unit?
No.
Okay. Yeah, and like there's a walk-in area across the highway that looks really good. So for future reference, if you have that tag, man, that looks great. But I think these ones might be a little, like you said, maybe a little too dry, for its distance from the river. I definitely think it's probably worth getting up high on one of these higher glassing knobs and checking it out at some point. But I would be surprised if there's a bunch of whitetail up there. I would see probably a few mule deer coming out of, like Jeff's terminology, the texture. Probably some mule deer coming out of the texture up there, because they don't necessarily like to be in the swamp as much, during the day. So
you think in this area, most of the deer are probably going to be on the other side of the road?
Exactly. They'll be down along the bottom, like along the river proper.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting to see as we're driving along this road and some of the other roads too. It just looked like it went from mule deer and then whitetail. Like there wasn't much of a transition. It seemed like it was, right there is where the whitetail starts. But that's to the untrained eye, I guess. But based on the things that I was supposed to be looking for, that's what it seemed to be to me.
Yeah, and I think, especially it's that correlation, I think, more of the proximity to the water source, it seems like. So when we drove through last night, I was making an exclamation to Jess that, like, wow, there's a lot of mule deer up in these like alfalfa fields and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we saw all mule
so-
deer when we drove through. So
Yeah, which is great too, because like I feel like we don't you don't feel like you run into mule deer all that often off the road. So.
yeah, that's true.
But the other thing to take into consideration is the fact that, like, man, whitetail they love the thick stuff so much that even if they're there, sometimes they don't come out of it. So
Right.
that can be frustrating for sure.
Yeah, it was also, I mean, I don't know. I just think of like forests when I think of whitetail, and there are like a lot of these areas. I thought there was gonna be kind of more cover, bigger trees, and there's really not. I mean,
No. Yeah, there's a lot of that Russian olive stuff, and I know that the whitetail love bedding under that Russian olive because the way that it comes down, it basically the branches of it create like a little dome where they can get in underneath there, and they have space to hang out. And you just can't see. I mean, if they're in the Russian olive, you just like can't see them. So that's something to consider. And I think maybe when you're thinking about your ambush tactics, man, finding a strip of Russian olives that then comes to a food source is like probably a pretty good standard thing to look for. But it also depends. There's a lot of variables, but that's just something I think I like.
okay, yeah.
All right, so number 3 here. Go ahead, Abby.
Wait, this is number 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one is, when you say number 3, it's actually one. The
It's
number one that you sent me, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's named number 1, but working in our right to left, it's the third one.
Okay, great. No, this is good.
Oh, that'd be hilarious if we were talking about different ones. I think a lot of them have some similar attributes, but yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So
What do you think about this place?
So this is actually, I think, the place that we stopped here, and we thought this was kind of the best looking spot that we visited, right?
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Yes, because there was a good amount of territory.
You can get kind of back off the road. There was a good amount of cover. It was sort of unclear. Looking at its scouting, it looked a lot greener, but it didn't look like they were actually irrigating that front field. So,
Oh man, I love to hear that, because it's one of those things where, like, if I imagine myself as a local living in this area, and if I'm driving through here on my way to work or whatever, like, I'm always looking at that stuff right off the road to see kind of like what's happening. And if there's not much right next to that road, I probably am like, I don't know, I don't know what their names are. The Johnsons here they're not doing well on their property this year. I'm just going to keep looking for some other stuff. But if there's good green up back off the road that you can't really see, man, I think that is would elevate that spot to me. The other thing is there's some great oxbows, some on that river that you can go hunt. And, if you think about it, this is that exact scenario that I was just talking about. So an oxbow, or, it kind of looks like a peninsula that the creek or the river runs around. And those deer are going to probably, I'm not, like I said, each spot's a little bit different, but those deer are probably going to bed in those Russian olives and the cottonwoods right there on the oxbow. And then instead of going across the creek or the river, they're going to come back towards the feed. And you know what? It's kind of a pinch point. I mean, they don't really have much, they don't really have anywhere else to go unless they go into the water. I'm not saying they'd never get into the water, but just is the path of least resistance, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be I think it would be a great spot for an ambush. Looking at something like those oxbows where you've got thick bedding areas and then you've got one path that leads to the feed.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that stuff.
Yeah, it was funny. Just now I had to switch the layers because I was confused. I was looking at the numbers and I had it set for antelope. And all of a sudden I thought, wait a second. What are we doing here? Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But that might lead. And, I see this one. There's this one in particular that I'm looking at, this one oxbow. Gosh, I hope I'm getting my terminologies correct. I'm sure I am. Yeah. Anyway, but it's got this great clump of trees and cottonwoods and probably a bunch of willows and stuff out there right on the tip of that oxbow. And then you've got a small clearing, and then it goes one set of bushes or trees that are kind of off to the side that you could hide in. Now you'd want to make sure you get your wind right.
Yeah.
But and sometimes that if that wind is coming straight out of the north, which it can happen when you get some new storms or stormier weather coming through, when it comes out of the north, man, I would be sitting on that tree waiting for him to walk out into that. Oh man, that's good. And but then again, you kind of have to have a lot of tools in the toolbox, because if you have wind coming out of the southwest, like it sometimes does in Wyoming, it's kind of probably the prevailing wind is out of the southwest where I live. If that happens, then you're going to want to change up your tactics, right? Or change up your spots and not sit on that tree, because then your wind is blowing right into the bushes where the deer are bedded in the first place. So that wouldn't be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all it's easy to scout, but figuring out what to do when I get there, that's going to be the challenge.
Yeah. Well, and I do there's some of those new, weather, the weather markers on Onyx, and they can usually, if you look at those, they'll show you kind of the direction the wind is coming from. I think the other thing is called windy.com. Let me just verify this.
Yeah, I think that's the one that you sent me before.
Yeah, and windy.com will show you where the winds are coming out of for that right now.
I can't imagine being in that bush, if it's the same bush or any bush, it just, and you see something come out and it's at 100 yards. So that's rifle done range, but with a bow, it's got to take some work. Is there anything that you can do to kind of bring it across that, or just hope that it grazes to you?
You'd want to probably just hang tight in September and just hope it comes across there. Is that how far that is across? That's a great point to note.
The from the bush to the first clump, straight up, if you're looking north, is about 30 yards. So that'd be money. But if something comes off on that backside, it looks pretty thick on that backside. If anything on that backside comes out, it'd be just torture.
Yep, you'd be watching them walk until it got dark. So one of the things that's important is that is a super good thing to keep in mind. I'm glad you brought that up too, man. If there's a way, and I think there kind of is in this feature, if there's a way to drop down into the creek bottom and make a move on something, I think that would be a kind of your 15 minutes of light left or 30 minutes of light left, and they're not getting closer. Let's try something fancy. And you could honestly drop down into that creek bottom and walk that sandy shore all the way around that deer and get to the other side if they're on the opposite side of you. It'd be kind of a Hail Mary type kamikaze move, but you never know. It could turn up.
Yeah.
So yeah, having that's so good. Having that plan B in mind is that's smart, man. That would be good to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Yeah, I like that spot. That was definitely the one that felt the most confident about.
The other thing that I wouldn't like, I definitely, if you wanted to do some still hunting, like, just kind of like creeping through some bedding areas middle of the day, or like trying to see if you can't catch some antlers as you're like really moving slowly. That stuff across the creek there, just for listeners, it's kind of like, it's that Russian olive that I was just talking about. It's got some thick spots, but also like it's probably just knee-high grass, so you can kind of slowly make your way through it, and it's sparsely treed. I think you can go and try to move slowly through some of that stuff middle of the day and maybe pick up a deer across the creek, and that also butts up against the backside of the neighbors who you can't hunt that place, but I'm sure that the neighbors probably have a bunch of those deer coming out into their fields from that other side. So I'd be looking at that as a midday kind of, I'm just trying to see if I can't find something and get a jump on a critter. I would try that too. That looks fun.
How spooky are they? When I was hunting antelope 2 years ago, you said that one of the tactics that people can use is like walking straight at an antelope. As long as you don't look like a threat, you might be fine. Just kind of put your head down and pretend like you're eating once in a while. But they have problems with like depth perception or something like that. If a whitetail sees you, is it over?
I would say most of the time, yeah. Pretty much like so antelope could get curious, right? And like kind of meander forward, and like they're not sure what you are, and like they're kind of weird about that stuff. Mule deer, they see you and then they might, bolt, and then they stop at like 40 yards and turn back and look, or 40 to 60. And then whitetail, they'll see you and then they'll pause, just trying to get an idea of what you are. But then as soon as they're freaked out, they bolt and they're gone, right? So I think you could, let's just say the example is you're creeping through here, you see some antlers sticking out of the thick grass, and you get drawn back, and then that deer stands up and looks at you. You can still get a shot off before they peace out if you're in a good range. So I wouldn't say it's impossible to do that, to get a shot off once they see you. You just kind of have to be prepared.
Okay.
You guys want to look at the next one?
Yep. Abby's prepping her.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about if whitetail were spookier than mule deer or not. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I don't know. I bet you every fanatic of one or the other will have a different opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so the next spot, all these spots are pretty similar. This one is really kind of the biggest ag area. There's not a whole lot of cover. Even if I remember correctly, I think even along the river here, there's just not a lot of trees or anything.
Well, the top part of it looked different than the bottom, and one of the roads that looks like you can get into, it actually looks more like someone's driveway. So we kind of looked at the bottom part of this one, and there's a road that goes into there, and then the edges of that were super, super thick. But there was not, like Abby said, didn't really look like there was hard to make a move on anything. You just have to like stand in one spot, and it'd be difficult to figure out where they might be coming out from. And then the opposite side was kind of a bluff with some houses, so people could just watch you with binoculars and watch the drama unfold.
That's funny. So this is one of them. I actually went down here trying to find, we were kind of we were in the area. We had shotguns, and we were trying to spot and stalk geese, actually, and we saw geese out here. So I've been down to that. I know exactly what you're talking about. So it's like a weird feeling of like you're in someone's backyard when you're trying to drive into there. And so I think knowing that this is in a walk-in hunting area, they're probably okay with that. Like they kind of expect it once it comes to season. I really like the fact that there is a bluff that you can go sit on and glass. So my thought process would be like, if you had a day to go scout, or if you had a day to go and like while you're hunting and you're at an evening where you wanted to just find deer and not necessarily think you're going to kill that evening, I would go sit on that bluff, like honestly, not too far from the houses, because it's a really excellent vantage point. And I would sit up there and find out where the deer are coming out of the river bottom. Because like you said, if it's a little bit sparser, they're going to have kind of a favorite hole that they're in that you probably can't see from an aerial image. I think when you look at it, this whole property, like you said, it's really vast as far as like ag land is concerned. And then all of the edges of the ag land are kind of surrounded by the riparian areas of the river. I would love to go to this spot and get a surveillance of where deer are coming in and out of before ever trying to make a move in to get tight on deer. That's simply because I don't think that, there's enough area here and there's enough like unknowns. There's not like a big beacon of like, oh, this is where the habitat is, that I think you should take it with a little bit of a softer approach on this one. I also think that, if you have other people hunting this property while you're out there, this is definitely one where you could have multiple folks out here, and I think you could still get away with it because there's so much river bottom that folks can hunt along. I would just take this one and really with any of them, if you can get eyes on them before you move in there, like that's ideal. But, we talked about that last one where there's these oxbows that lead to the feed, and it's like very obvious where the cover is. Like that's kind of like a formula that you can, I'm not going to say you can count on it 100% of the time, but you'll have a lot higher confidence interval than if you go out to this place where you kind of just have a bunch of fields rimmed with the habitat you're looking for. So yeah, I would totally just check it out first. And heck, you never know, if you're up there during season glassing from that bluff, you might find that there's a deer like in a position where you can go make a move on them. So, I would just try to do that before you commit to that spot totally,
So that's a pretty big area. And if the bluff is on the left side and that's where the road is, but there is a road that can get you all the way to that edge by the water, do you want to park by that bluff and then walk in and then wait for evening? Or do you want to drive all the way to the end? Like, which one's going to be least disruptive? If you walk in maybe 2 hours before evening, is something just going to assume that you walked by and you're now gone? Is that going to be better than driving your vehicle all the way to the back there?
So one thing to keep in mind is all these areas have their ranch areas, right? And farm areas. So the vehicles are actually like they're not super skittish of the vehicles themselves. They're way more because they're just used to farmhands driving by all day long. And people, always kind of being up in their business on equipment and machinery. I know like when I was a kid, we would drive the combines and swathers next to like riparian areas, and you could literally see deer just sitting there watch you as you drive by in this giant, super loud tractor. So that's a short way of saying I wouldn't mind driving down there if I was you, but I would park or put your, park and get out and all that stuff in a place where your scent and sight are nowhere near that deer. So if I say nowhere near, probably at least, a quarter of a mile for whitetail. I think you could probably add a bigger buffer for mule deer just because of the way the landscape is. But for this stuff, man, it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty commonplace for people to be walking around and around up in their business. Now, I will say, you look at the map on these walk-in areas in Wyoming, and they are going to have parking areas that marked on the map. So be sure to check that out. And if they have a parking area marked on the map, then go to that parking area just to follow the rules better.
Yeah, we saw two different ones, and that was kind of the option. There was one you would park here, and then you would walk to a spot where you might have a chance, versus driving all the way pretty much in there and parking at that spot.
I'd probably drive all the way in there and not, I wouldn't worry about driving by deer, whitetail in particular.
Cool.
I don't know. And you're probably going to get some people be like, that dude doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And I'm just saying, from my experience, at least, of, being one of those farmers out there, like literally watching deer watch you drive these giant machines and trucks and stuff go by. They're usually not too bothered about it. They're more bothered if you get out of the truck, slam your door, and start talking and like start walking their direction or have your wind blowing their way,
Yeah, makes sense.
So what are your thoughts, Abby?
Yeah, I mean, I've totally had that experience that you're describing on ranches where, you drive by deer and they just stare at you from 40 yards. But I do wonder if that changes, like, in the rifle season. I bet that will change,
Totally.
But hopefully in the archery season, they won't be too pressured and they'll hang around.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I think you guys have a pretty good approach that you're already looking at here. So it should be, I'm not going to say a slam dunk. You should see deer at least.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question I know the answer to. Is this something that a non-resident could get leftover tag, or leftover tags a thing of the past?
This particular area does not have leftover tags. Now there are leftover licenses, or let me preface this. There were leftover licenses for whitetail in Wyoming in the leftover draw. So now they've moved to like basically an over-the-counter type situation. And I just pulled it up here because I've got it handy. And I do not see any whitetail buck tags left as like an over-the-counter option for non-residents.
That's good. It just keeps the conflict down. Because I just started looking at this, and I was definitely getting the itch when we were going before. Not that I would like jump in and like shoot Abby's deer or anything like that, but I think both of us armed two different areas might be kind of be a fun thing. So the hunter and me started twitching. So it's good to know. I could just shut that down.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jaden, you probably know better than I am, but there are areas in Wyoming where there's like unlimited doe tags basically for whitetail.
Oh, totally. All of the east side of the Bighorns, of the Bighorn Mountains, you can go and kind of stack whitetail does up in your freezer, man. So if it is something you wanted to do, it's like, yeah, Abby's, you're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of our problem, and maybe it's a good segue to the next thing we want to talk about is we want to have like an awesome archery experience with whitetail, and then also with elk. I definitely want to call for Abby, and we've looked at some areas, and we've even like practiced some stalks. So if we think they're bedding here and they're going to come up here during the day, this would be the way that we would access them. But I don't want to get into the thing where you have too many different things that you want to do. So you can only do like, we got to do one day for my doe whitetail, and then one day for your buck whitetail, and then we try to just get a bull elk on the third day or something like that. So segue to elk.
Well,
Okay.
Did you have a bonus spot you wanted to talk about, or we could talk about that off air?
Bonus spot. That's right.
Oh yeah. So the bonus spot here, before we move into elk, because I do love talking elk, obviously. The bonus spot I was looking at was just one walk-in area south of the last one you looked at, and in particular, it was, we actually tried to sneak on some geese in this area, and we saw deer there. So I can confirm they live there. But I really liked how in this particular area, there was a creek that flowed into the river, with agriculture on both sides of this creek, north and south. So the main river flows north and south. The creek flows east and west, and there's ag on both sides of that creek. Right where those two things come together, it looks really thick and kind of it's really thick, good bedding, and right there, in a cool area where they can get out of the heat. But then I like how there's some I think I know this is mostly Russian olive and stuff down here along this section. They're going to be kind of slowly moving to the edge of that ag field on both sides of the creek. Now there is definitely like some buildings and stuff on the south side of the creek. Maybe stay to the north side just as a courtesy to those folks who are working in those buildings or whatever. But yeah, totally would look in that where those two things come together. I just really like that feature of having the creek coming in to the main river and how much bedding and cover and ag land there is on both sides of that. So check that out. I'll send you that pin here in just a few minutes.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, hit me with what we're talking about with elk.
All right, so we're trying to apply the right like logic or whatever. So 2 years ago, we were hunting this spot, and we were going to drive by. We're going to keep driving, but Abby saw a cow elk, and so we camped in this area because we saw the cow elk. That evening, we heard an elk bugle, and it freaked me out. It was everything that I dreamed it would be. And I thought, okay, it's almost time to get up, but it was like 11:45 at night. I thought, well, I'm not going to be sleeping at all for the next 6 hours. So woke up. The bugling had long since stopped. We walked back to where we saw the cow elk, and we were making our way right at first light, and we're going slowly down this little trail, and there's 2 cow elks looking right at us. And I was kind of in front of Abby, which was stupid because she had the bow.
Typical dude move.
Typical dude move. Well, it was like we both had the same sort of idea, and I was just kind of like, well, this is what I thought. And then we didn't expect to see them at that spot. We expected to see them back a little bit. So, I mean, it was right off the road pretty much. It was just a little bit in the trees, so it was kind of dark. And there was stuff in the way, so she wouldn't have even be able to sneak an arrow in anyway. But those 2 bolted, and then we kept meandering down, and we saw where they had bedded. And, I mean, it was just some huge beds. And so that was 2 years ago. And last year, Abby put game cameras up and saw just a bunch of really nice elk. And you've seen the photos. So part of us, she went up there last year, didn't see anything during the season. They were around. Had to be.
Well, yeah, so I had game cams up during the season. And so looking at the photos afterwards, I think I got 4 different, like, either pairs or single hunters on the camera. And so I think they're getting pushed probably further up, but we're kind of trying to figure out, I mean, ideally this year I can get there on the first day of the season. But if I don't, then, like, where are they getting pushed, basically, is what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, so I love this spot too. Jeff has sent me, I think, Jeff, this is the camera you sent me in that area that I really like, right?
Yeah, almost positive.
Okay. So I spent a bunch of time scouting this stuff that you guys are talking about as well. I didn't go into this particular slope that you have the camera on, but I've definitely been up in that country. And you're exactly right. Like, all along that road that's, just a few hundred feet below your trail camera, are camps for hunting during the year. In particular, there's like a kind of a grouping of camp spots that's probably about a half mile from the trail camera. And so I would imagine you're exactly right. Like, it's just probably too much pressure there, and the elk are getting moved. So for those gamers at home, this is a great looking, like, dark timbered north facing slope with a couple pockets of kind of like parky areas, little small meadows and swampy. I don't know. Is it swampy right there? Is it kind of wet?
Yeah, there are areas that are pretty swampy.
Cool. So, and it's just like classic, like, awesome elk habitat. So what they're probably doing, though, is as soon as those folks hit, within about a mile, or probably half mile to a mile on either side of that main road, those elk are going to just be pushed back a little further into 1, the high country, and 2, that gnarly hole. Let's see, I'm trying to find if there's a good name here. This is like the type of hole that should be named like Devil's Gate or like Hell's Half Acre or something like that. Like it is gnarly. I went down into the bottom of there one summer, and it's gross. But that's where the elk are going to be pushed.
So are you talking like back towards the creek?
Yeah, actually, like north. Yep.
Yeah.
So the way this is like, the way that this whole thing is situated is you've got a big alpine area to the south, and then fingers running north down deep into this canyon down north. And I can say this, in that high country, those elk are totally there on that first weekend. And you're probably going to be in elk if you go to that spot on opening day. But after that, man, things get squirrely, and a lot of times they just stuff down into that gnarly hole that I was just telling you about. And I know it's a couple miles as the crow flies, but for elk that just takes an hour to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
they
really love that
because
stuff.
Like even like through the season actually, I'd still get nice elk on that camera like at night.
Mm-hmm.
But so they're moving all the way down during the day and then they're coming back up at night.
I think what you're seeing is there are definitely elk. I think I probably should have clarified that. There probably are elk that are hanging around there the entire season, but they're getting pushed around by people, right? So they're not going to be in any predictable area, right? Unless you're just covering a lot of miles up there, which is totally possible. It doesn't suck. The place where you're going to get away from the folks and into elk that are not as pressured is going to be down in that gnarly hole. So, and some of those elk probably do bounce down into there, just to escape that pressure. But that's where I'm saying, like, if you want to try to, it's either you could take the approach of trying to go down into that hole and trying to find where they're at, maybe even now before season, or you're going to have to cover more miles up in the high stuff to try to find them. The other thing is, like last year, we got that. And I don't know about this mountain range in particular, but here in my home range, we got a September 7th snowstorm that pushed everything out of the high country, which was kind of weird. It wasn't like they all of a sudden were on winter range. They just weren't at the top of the mountain anymore. And so that would be as you watch the weather and stuff like that, if you have a big storm come through, that would definitely kind of edge toward the lower end of things. Mm-hmm. So, but if you guys are up there on the opening weekend, if it was Jaden Bales making this decision to go hunt this area, I love that opening weekend, going high into those parks and trying to find elk that, 2 years ago, I was up in that same high country and they were bugling their face off on the 1st of September. So
wow.
It could be good.
Yeah. We heard, end of September. When I was there 2 years ago, that's when I heard. Yeah. So it was because it then transferred over into rifle season, which is why we it was one night for elk, and then we went to mule deer opener at the spot before. So yeah, I think you'll notice as well with the hunting pressure. So obviously on the first weekend, people are just getting into the area and they're just then disrupting what the elk normally do, right? So as you get into Sunday of the first, especially towards the evening on Sunday, you're probably going to have a dang hard time finding any elk that want to talk, if you can find any on Saturday too. And then for about that next week, because the next week's usually Labor Day weekend, people are in there heavy during Labor Day weekend, and it makes it kind of tough. You just got to get further or find these. When I say further, it's either further up, down, or distance-wise from where the folks are at, right? Mm-hmm. To find those elk that are less disturbed and willing to talk and willing to play, if that's the game you're wanting to play. And then back towards the end of the season, and actually, so I killed my bull that in 2019 on the 29th of September, and that's when they had kind of fired up again because people, I think, had kind of gotten burnt out. Shoot, I was burnt out, I'll be honest. So, makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, and then they start picking up again later on. And I think it's mostly a function
mean, if you get into elk that are unpressured, you'll find rut activity kind of that whole month. But if you're in a highly pressured area, I think it mostly is a function of when people are in and they're screwing with them more than not.
Mm-hmm. So 2 questions I would have then. How would that impact your calling? Would you be hesitant to bugle and do more of a cow call until things started to heat up again? And then second thing would be full moon is what, September 20th? How does that impact?
Oh man. So if you guys want to really go into the nerdiness of all this stuff, you guys should check out Elk Nut and get his app or go check out all Corey Jacobson's stuff on the Elk 101 stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I'll give you the layman's terms, right? Like the gist of what I have picked up. I really think that, and it works for my buddy Mason and I in this mountain range as well. In that early time when they shut down and it's hot and like things are just kind of slow, you know, if you find a place where they want to be, like a nice wallow that's, you know, been used recently, or a nice kind of swampy area where they definitely hang out a lot, you can set up and do a kind of calling sequence where you start with some cow calls, you do some light bugling, you know, and you just try to work something up. But then what you do is you just sit and you don't move for an hour or so, or 2 hours. And you just got to pay attention to your surroundings, and they'll come in silent during that first week of season. So that's something that I would think about that first week if you're not getting any bugles. Obviously, like, and so this is Cody Rich's like kind of game plan is like run around, try to find elk in the mornings and in the evenings when they're most active, right? And like see if you can't get a bugle, because if you can get something to come in that's hot and heavy, like, dude, I'd take that over sitting on my duff and like waiting for something to sneak up on me any day. So then once it comes towards the end of the season, I think there's going to be a lot of people frustrated, and then they're going to blame it on the moon. But I also think that if you're out there, one thing you can do is in the middle of the night, if you're not finding any bugles, go bugle into these big gnarly drainages and find elk that way. And then you can go into those areas during the day and be a little bit closer to those elk if they're not talking as much during the day. So that's that actually it was a tactic I used to find a few spots that first weekend of season when they were bugling hot and heavy too. So that was still like August 30th, August 29th, I think is maybe what that evening I first started doing that. And I found a couple more areas to check out by driving around and bugling. So it's a good tactic.
Cool.
Yeah, you just have to make sure you have a good supply of Red Bulls to keep you going. Something like that.
Yeah. What else you got?
I don't know. I think that covers my questions.
Yeah, I think that's about as soon as we sign off within 10 minutes, I'm sure there'll be a couple questions. But yeah, thanks for all the insight again.
Yeah. What dates are you trying to do you're talking about 2 different hunts in September. Do you have an idea of what dates you're trying to do one versus the other?
I'm gonna try to hit the elk on opening weekend just to see if I can, basically get lucky, and then I'll probably hold off on that. And Jeff's gonna come down for a week, probably like 3rd week of September.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So that'll be kind of our elk plan. And I've got a cow tag up there too. So I don't know. It's like Jeff's probably hoping. Is that the cow tag that starts October 1st? With a rifle? Yeah, with a rifle. Yep. Nice. Man, I think that's underrated. I think if folks because those elk are still going to be bugling their face off on October 1st, that would be just as dang near just as fun, because if you find a bugling bull, like, you can sneak into that herd and there's going to be cows nearby. So that could be really fun. Cool.
Yeah, so that's my decision. I got to figure out when exactly I'm going to come down. Best case scenario, which is also, I wouldn't say worst case, but a different scenario, is that she shoots both animals before I even come down, so that I just come down here and we just eat barbecue, elk, and maybe I help her with the antlers. But that's it. So
I love it.
So we'll see.
Well, cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes, Abby. I know I'm excited for you too, because you're doing all the work beforehand. I mean, it's like, you're doing all the right moves, right? So just gotta get out there and hope all the things come together, right?
Yeah.
We got some game cams out, so excited to check those.
Sweet. Well, did you guys set any for the whitetail?
No, because those walk-in areas, you can't actually get in them till the season opens.
That's a good point. Forgot about that. So,
Yeah.
well, good stuff, guys. I'm like I said, I'm always handy for. I'll give you my thoughts on anything anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. All you got to do is sound like you know what you're talking about, and you can just give so many people confidence, right? Like, you could be telling us the wrong tactics, but you say it in such a convincing way, like, oh man, yeah, this is great. This is perfect.
Thanks. That's why I always do a disclaimer at the beginning, like, I'm not a doctor. This is not, you can't sue me over unlawful practice for misinformation on this stuff. So
yeah. That's like teaching 101, right? You just got to pretend, speak with authority. If you do have questions, you can admit that to the kids, but yeah, you got to have confidence.
Love it.
Cool,
guys.
Well,
Well,
thanks
I'm
again,
super
man. Really
excited
appreciate
for
it.
Yeah, no problem. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
All
See
right.
you.
Bye.
Hey, bye.